Welcome to Flipped Classroom. Today's lesson is on reader response criticism. This is part 2 of the series of literary theory. Let's take a look at this image from Twilight. It says, "I've been here every night watching you sleep," enamored with his comment, and says, "Oh, Edward, that's ever so romantic." But the question is, if somebody watches you sleeping every night, is that a crush or is that creepy? Well, it depends on audience interpretation. That is the crux of reader response theory. Reader response criticism emerged in the 1970s. The theory is that basically a text exists only when it is experienced by a reader. So the task of the critic is to investigate this dynamic relationship between the reader and the text in order to discover how that text works. In reader response theory, it's the reader's reaction to literature which is the most vital part in interpreting the meaning of the text. However, reader response criticism can take a number of different approaches. Psychoanalytical, feminism, structuralist, these are all different lenses that could be used from a reader response theory. What these different lenses have in common when using a reader response approach is that they maintain what a text is cannot be separate from what it does. Lois Tyson, one of the experts in literary theory, explains that reader response theorists share two common beliefs. The first is that the role of the reader cannot be omitted from our understanding of literature. And second, that readers do not passively consume the meaning presented to them by an objective literary text. Rather, readers actively make the meaning they find in literature. In this theory, the reader must be an active participant. The interpretation is created when a reader and a text interact. So textual analysis must consider both the reader and the text. It's not simply looking at the text in isolation. For example, just looking at the setting or plot or conflict or character. That's not enough. You also need to include the interaction of the reader. What is the reading process and what happens during the reading process are two of the key factors that are investigated. The reader, it's important to include his or her view of the world, background, purpose for reading, knowledge of the world, and knowledge of words. Each reader is unique and brings this unique perspective to the interpretation. Also, you have to include the text with all its various linguistic elements. By looking at the reader plus the text, that is how you get to the meaning. How the text and the reader interact so the reader can make sense of the text. Some of the common questions asked by a reading response critic is, how does the interaction of the text and reader create meaning? What does a phrase-by-phrase analysis of a short literary text or a key portion of a larger text tell us about the reading experience pre-structured by or built into that text? Do the sounds, the shapes, the words as they appear on the page, or how they're spoken by the reader enhance or change the meaning of the word or the work? How might we interpret a literary text to show that the reader's response is, or analogous to, the topic of the story? What does the body of criticism published about a literary text suggest about the critics who interpret that text, and or about the reading experience produced by the text? One type of reader response theory are the structuralists. This is where the reader brings to the text a predetermined system for ascertaining meaning. Let's take the stoplight, for example. When we're driving a car and we see a red light hanging over an intersection, we have learned that we must stop our car. The red light is a sign or a code in our society that provides us with a way of interpreting and ordering the world around us. Text contains these types of signals and signs, such as the stoplight, with predetermined interpretations. Let's take a look at the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz. Roads have predetermined meanings, paths, journeys. And the fact that the road is gold, yellow, symbolizes to many wealth or money. Therefore, looking at the yellow brick road, there's a predetermined interpretation ready for the reader to ascertain its meaning. The same would be true in Snow White with the red apple. The apple contains a sign. It's a symbol for evil that goes all the way back to biblical meaning. Therefore, when we read about Snow White being given the apple, the audience has a predetermined interpretation that it will be a negative experience for her to bite the apple. This is one form of reader response criticism. But one of the biggest challenges with reader response criticism is what happens when everybody reads the same text but has a different interpretation. The reader response critics say would want to look at why. Why are there different interpretations? In what ways do such conditions such as age, gender, or upbringing, or even race account for different responses? This proved true when reading the yellow wallpaper. The 2016 readers often misinterpret the story and wonder if she has been kidnapped and locked away in the room, whereas that would have been a different meaning for the readers in the early 19th century, also in two kinds. Depending on your race, depending on if you are a Chinese American reader or of a different race, you might have a different interpretation of the mother's behavior due to your own experiences with Chinese culture. Therefore, age, gender, upbringing influence the reader's interpretation. So then who's the literary expert? Are all responses equally valid? Is one interpretation more correct than another? Well, a structuralist would say, since there's commonalities in signs and symbols, the more sophisticated reader would be able to come up with the same interpretation. Although reader response critics believe the reader plays a part in discovering the text meanings, just how large of a role or small of a role is debatable. For more information on reader response theory, here's a short bibliography of sources used for this presentation. Thank you for joining me today in Flipped Classroom.